had done. So, I mean, you know, those analogies were completely irrelevant. But more substantially, and I think these are some of the worrying signals, when you look at the ruling that the court gave, I mean, certain obvious and critical factors were simply left out of the equation. You quoted the passage in which the Chief Justice talked about Article 99 of the Constitution, which gives the High Court powers in respect of the invalidation of a parliamentary election or the determination of the vacancy of the seat of an elected member of parliament. Now, the reality is that that Article 99 has been interpreted by the Supreme Court in previous decisions, and it's been interpreted to mean that it is the High Court that has the exclusive jurisdiction. There are any number of cases that have determined that, including, by the way, the Sal matter. You know, in respect of Sal, which we talked about quite a bit last time, the Supreme Court determined that the High Court had exclusive jurisdiction, and the Chief Justice, at that time a Justice of the Supreme Court, was a part of that panel. In fact, when the matter went on review, she wrote the decision of the Supreme Court and very clearly laid out in, you know, elaborate language, Article 99 gives the High Court exclusive jurisdiction. So that's not a matter for the Supreme Court, or indeed, that's not even a matter for the High Court exercising its powers in respect of fundamental human rights. So these decisions are there. There's more of them. I'm not giving a lecture to a law class, so I'm not going to go through those cases. But those cases are well known. So if the court constituted, you know, recently wanted to depart from those judicial precedents, Article 1293 of the Constitution makes it quite clear that they have got to give us reasons why those decisions that they have given previously are to be departed from.
And indeed, I will come to you, Counsel. I'll come back to you. These are just your preliminary comments, just so you can continue. But essentially, what you're saying, and indeed the Chief Justice, when she was reading her ruling, as it were, mentioned that precedent of 2021 and even 2024. And still use that to justify her decision. And I'll come back to you. I just want Frank Davis to also give us his understanding of what happened. And I saw you kind of shaking your head when Mr. Chikata was submitting his points. What's your disagreement?
Good evening once again to your esteemed listeners and cherished viewers. I am going to lay my cards. I'm not in disagreement with anyone. We are espousing legal positions, so I need not be in disagreement with anybody. Okay. Now, your preamble, I mean, was a little bit confusing. You know, let's stick to the issues and don't let us compound what people already have termed a constitutional crisis.
I think I was just quoting what the Chief Justice
but
said.
You made some other comments, and I think, you know, in the first place, I was in court with great respect. My learned senior and colleague, our revered Chatu Chikata, was not in court. I was in court, and I sat in the proceedings from beginning to end.
But it was live.
Yeah.
Could have been followed from.
Don't you worry. What happens in court is not everything you see on television, so don't make those comments. When you are in court, you hear and see better than when you are alive, because it doesn't cover everything at the same time. Thaddeus Sori laid his objection. He wanted to start at a point. The Chief Justice told him to answer to the point that the other side has raised, and then lay his objection. So he laid his objection, and the court ruled on the matter. You know, when cases are sub judice, we are all lawyers. I hesitate and restrain myself from speaking to the merits of the matter which is in court, because this was just the first leg. The application mounted by the Speaker was to vacate or set aside the orders that the Supreme Court made. That application was dismissed, meaning that the orders of the Supreme Court still thrives. Okay, for this business, there is no constitutional crisis. There is no tough war. There is no problem between the judiciary and the legislature. So don't let us create.
No, but the Chief Justice herself said that there was a constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis because of the interpretation placed on Article 97 1G, and because of that, Parliament had suspended its proceedings sine die. The constitutional crisis the Chief Justice was alluding to was a crisis of 4 vacant seats. So you and the rival interpretation which had been placed upon by both the majority and the minority caucus in Parliament. That by itself found the writ which was invoked in the Supreme Court. That ruling has been given. And so in your opinion, the ruling is perfect? Can I please? Land. That ruling has been given. Both parties have been called upon to file their statements of case and settle on the memorandum of issues. The return date is on the 11th of November. Don't let us rake in matters as if there's an oddity. The Speaker himself has come out to say that Parliament will reconvene on the 7th of November. Let's all wait and see what happens in Parliament on the 7th. The speculation and the Speaker and the authority, constitution, who has the... We all know. I mean, we all know. We are lawyers. You think there's speculation here? Because people are also... We all know. Please. When I'm talking, please allow me to talk. When you were speaking, I was quiet. You are the moderator. Allow me to talk. People can place rival interpretations on everything they think they know. But we are lawyers. We should understand it better. A non-lawyer cannot tell me what I should understand in law. Please. The Supreme Court has exclusive and original jurisdiction for interpretation and enforcement of the Constitution. Parliament, Parliament, also has master over its proceedings. When it comes to constitutional interpretation, nobody can take that precedent from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has given a ruling. Let us wait on the 11th. The main case will be gone into. Then we can make comments after. Then we can make comments. It is sub judice. Then we can make comments after. But I just want to get an understanding, really, in summary of what you're saying. That per your view, whatever transpired last week, you don't see anything wrong with it because the Supreme Court was in the right, as interpreted by the Chief Justice Gertrude Tokon. Even if I say anything wrong with it, what am I supposed to say? The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. It has given its ruling. Indeed, if Thaddeus, experienced as he is, if he's still dissatisfied with the ruling of the Supreme Court, he knows what to do. I cannot come and sit here and say the Supreme Court was right or wrong. I place myself in prayer of contempt proceedings. The matter has been ruled upon. That's it. Whether the Supreme Court was wrong or not, that is the ruling. And until it is vacated or set aside, it is the ruling. I can't comment on that. It's sub judice. Okay, and let me tell you that we'll be joined very shortly by Eyimedu Entry, who is chair of the Constitutional and Legal Committee of Parliament, and he'll be joining us very shortly. But before he does that, I also do have George Lowe. Can you give us your preliminary views on, I mean, you've heard Mr. Chikato talk as well as Mr. Davis.
Well, clearly, let me say good evening to our cherished viewers and my senior Frank Davis I haven't seen in a while. And of course, Mr. Chikata and my good friend, Mr. Eyimedu, who I used to serve on the Constitutional Legal Committee with some time ago. You see, clearly, you will begin to see that whatever transpired in the Supreme Court means different things to different lawyers. And that is the TEF, the legal TEF. We always have disagreements and we see things from different perspectives. So clearly, I'm not surprised that our senior Frank Davis has taken this stand. Mr. Chikata has taken the other stand. Now, what is my stand? You see, my stand is that, number one, I disagree.
With what?
With the assertion that there is a constitutional crisis. I do not want to buy that at all. Because, you see, what is happening? For many people would only see a legal issue, but it is not purely a legal issue. It's also an issue of procedures vis-a-vis various institutions.
But you remember, I'll let you continue. Remember at a point in her ruling, the Chief Justice said that procedures do not override the legality of the matter.
You see, I am surprised that people are proceeding as though anybody is saying that the Supreme Court cannot do an interpretation of the Constitution. That right is theirs, and nobody is taking it away from them. But you'd also agree that in so doing, there are procedures to follow, there are precedents to guide us. And I believe that it is the departure from these two that has landed us where we are today. You see, as a member of Parliament, the framers of the Constitution understood what they wanted clearly when they made Mr. Speaker's rulings final on the floor of Parliament. You know that Parliament in itself even had a review power, where Mr. Speaker's ruling, somebody can go for a review from Parliament. They don't necessarily even have to go to the courts. That's number one. Number two, you see, when you look at the various provisions of the Constitution, everybody is taking it from a different perspective. But I say that, you see, the framers of the Constitution were clear in their minds as to who should declare seats vacant. That is why when there is a death or there is anything that takes away somebody
a member
from
of Parliament.
It is said that it is Mr. Speaker who will declare that vacant and direct the Electoral Commission to take the necessary proceedings to replace people in Parliament. The Constitution also envisages a point where there will be a time when, even though such a vacancy has occurred, we cannot go for a by-election, and so nothing can be done. And it says 3 months to an election. So I want us to look at all these things. I am saying that the Supreme Court has been called upon to give an interpretation. That interpretation, they say they will give on the 11th. But for me, some of the issues we are raising are also preliminary issues. They are not to the substance of what is before the Supreme Court. For instance, I have taken a view, and I've remained constant on that view. I believe that even as I speak to you now, the Supreme Court has nothing before it.
Okay, tell us why.
Because the writ that invoked their original jurisdiction or whatever jurisdiction, it's a nullity, because at the time Afenyomakin went to court, there was no issue. Why? Haruna is standing on a political platform somewhere and threatens that when he comes to Parliament, they will make Mr. Speaker declare seats vacant, because they think that in their view, the people have crossed carpet. Is that not true? Mr. Speaker hasn't said anything when they came to Parliament until the then minority leader, Atuforsin, put a formal motion before Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker says, I'll give my ruling in 2 days. It is only at that time that any action should have crystallized at all. So anything that was done before that action is a nullity.
But again, when you listen to the ruling of the CJ, she said that, yes, I mean, when it comes to the authority of Parliament to do what it has to do within the chambers, yes, it has it. But when it comes to interpretation of the law, and her argument was that in this case, it is the interpretation of Article 97
Please, I am saying that the only reason why Afenyomakin went to the Supreme Court for an interpretation was because he alleged in his own statement that he sent to the Supreme Court that this has happened and that Mr. Speaker was likely. So I'm saying that even at that time, Mr. Speaker had not indicated in any way that he was going to give a ruling on the matter. So far as I'm concerned, there was nothing before the Supreme Court, based on which I believe that anything that they have put on that that rate is out of the window.
It's out of the window, George Lowe says.
It's out of the window.
And when we come back, I would give you the opportunity to respond to this, Mr. Davis, when we come back. Gentlemen, yes, I will give you the opportunity to respond, as well as Mr. Imedrenchi, who will be joining us very shortly. You're still here on Agenda on TV3. When we come back, of course, you'll hear the response of Frank Davis, and then we'll go back to Mr. Chikata as well and proceed with the conversation. Stay with us.
Mama, stop worrying. How is Kobna? I got some of his medication. His friends are raising funds to support us.
The kidney disease has taken the toll on my son and our finances.
Mama, there is hope. The pharmacist told me about Mahama's policies on chronic diseases. John Mahama is going to establish the Mahama Cares Fund to support Ghanaians with kidney diseases, sickle cell, cancer, diabetes, hypertension and other heart conditions to support and ease the financial burden on families like ours. Mama, but that is not all. Ghanaians can access free health care when they go to the CHIPS compound, health centers, clinics and polyclinics. Mama, we have to vote wisely for Kobne's sake. Mama, wipe your tears. Wipe your tears. Mahama cares.
Vote for change. Vote for John Mahama and the NDC.
My life wasn't always like this. I worked in a bank and had money in bonds to cushion me for the future. Then, with a stroke of a pen, my life was destroyed. My bank was part of the 420 financial institutions which the MPP government recklessly collapsed. What was to become the life of the workers? No one in this insensitive government cared. And suddenly, I was jobless. Their incessant borrowing also led to a debt restructuring program that affected me, and just like that, a significant portion of my lifetime investment vanished. Even worse, my lifetime savings from 30 years of hard work has been rendered useless due to the continuous depreciation of the cedi and extremely high cost of living in the country. Now, look at me. The fruits of my toil and sweat have all gone down the drain because of bad leadership. What to eat with my children is even a struggle. God, help me and the many who share in my pain. Let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end. Change must come.
Vote for change. Vote for John Mahama and the NDC.
The 5 kg of rice has moved from 25 cedis to 165. Oh. Hey!
Boss, cement moved from 24 cedis to 105 cedis now.
Hey! The kenke is 5 cedis. The fish I have 10, 15 and 20 cedis. Which one do you want?
Hey! Stop the A.
Hey!
Vote for change. Vote for John Mahama and the NDC.
We are all looking forward to. I have in the studio with me Frank Davis. He's the chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Committee of the governing New Patriotic Party. I have on my left George Lowe, who is a lawyer, leading member of the opposition NDC, also a former member of parliament for North Dine in the Volta region. I have a video call renowned lawyer Chachu Chikata, the man who led the legal team of the NDC in the 2012-2013 election petition. So before we went on break, Mr. Davis, you had wanted to listen to respond to some of the things said by Mr. Lowe about the fact that Apenyo marking went to court even before the Speaker could make any pronouncement. And that has been one of the main arguments from critics of the governing MPP and indeed the now majority in Parliament, majority minority, because now this is being contested, that it looks like Afenyo Markin wanted to force the hands of Parliament into this by going to the court even ahead of the Speaker declaring any seat vacant.
Beatrice, George, I mean, when a writ is filed in any court of competent jurisdiction and the processes are served on you, irrespective of what position you take on the matter, the general jurisprudence is that you restrain from doing anything which has effect of rendering those processes nugatory. I mean, it's something which is trite. I mean, it is settled. So as to whether at the time the Speaker was going to give his statement, his pronouncement, ruling, or whatever anybody decides to call it, he cannot, sitting here as lawyers, we cannot escape from the factual situation that processes had been served on him. Whether those processes were served legally, regularly, or properly, it's another matter.
Yeah, but
please.
But you see, you are responding to, let me...
George, when you were speaking, I was quiet. Maybe when I'm done, you can seek permission and respond. When you were speaking, I was very quiet.
Let him land. I'll come to you, Mr. Lowe.
As to whether or not the service is regular, it is proper, it is invalid, it's not for you to say. The processes have been served on you. What you do is to go to court and have the service of the processes set aside. That is, if you think that the service is irregular.
And not to return like
But not to write a letter. I mean, with great respect to the Speaker. He's my very good friend, a very distinguished lawyer. I mean, I've known Bagman ever since I started practice. He's my senior. I've known him. He's a very, very serious person, and he understands what he does. But for me, to decide that because you have not been properly served in your estimation and write a letter to the Supreme Court returning those processes, I mean, well, unnecessary.
So that was wrong?
I'm saying it was unnecessary because at the end of the day, whatever he did was deemed not to be proper. Okay? So if you are trying to say that at the time they invoked the jurisdiction, whatever happened was a nullity, George, I mean, you see, don't let us stray into matters which are already before the court. All right? The matter will be determined on the 11th. They'll take everything into consideration. This was just an interlocutory application for the processes to be set aside and the order to be vacated. So that is where we are. So don't let us jump into whether it's a nullity. Whether it's a nullity or not, the matter has been argued.
You had the opportunity
to respond. The matter has been argued.
You had the opportunity to respond now, and I'll come to you, Mr. Chikata. I'll come to you very shortly.
How could that be a nullity?
Please, if you can just give your brief response, and I'll go to Mr. Chikata.
Bottom line is that my senior and learned colleague knows that service is fundamental to everything. Service is fundamental. Proper service is fundamental. And that is the reason why, Mr. Speaker, because he has had an agreement with Parliament as to the processes they will use, the courts, the processes they would use to serve him as Speaker and members of Parliament. Obviously, that process was violated. So he says, look, this thing that they brought to my legal department, we are returning it because it doesn't follow the proper process. But he goes, you see, again, he goes to challenge that, as he said, he must do. So clearly, Mr. Speaker hasn't done anything wrong.
He hasn't done anything.
He hasn't done anything wrong because he has gone before the same court to tell them that I challenge the service on me of this writ.
I want to get the thought of Mr. Chikata. We're still waiting for Mr. Imedwenchi to connect with us. Mr. Chikata, you heard the CJ saying that, and the argument of the Speaker was that I have not been served because per the law, I'm supposed to be served on Mondays. And the CJ, during her ruling, said that, yes, you're supposed to be served on Mondays, but also the law permits us to serve the legal department of Parliament any other day. Yes. And that was what she used to defend her stance. You've just heard the argument of Frank Davis here, as well as the counter-argument from George Lowe. I wonder where you stand on it.
Our submissions. They are not arguing.
I believe that the issue should not be looked at primarily from the point of view of the circular that the Chief Justice referred to. And by the way, the Chief Justice took it upon herself to make reference to some earlier circular of her predecessor in India, which was not before the court. It was not part of what was before the court. I think that it is really the Constitution that we ought to look at when we are determining these issues of service on the Speaker and the Clerk. And it's quite clear in Article 117 that civil or criminal process coming from any court or place out of Parliament shall not be served on or executed in relation to the Speaker or a member of the Clerk to Parliament while he's on his way to, attending at, or returning from any proceedings of Parliament. So the Constitution itself makes clear provision, and I believe that part of the reason that the circular was issued had to do with some discussions between the Chief Justice and the Speaker as to how this provision in the Constitution should be implemented. But, you know, I am more concerned with what I believe are fundamental problems with the ruling that was delivered by the Supreme Court. And I don't think that Mr. Davis has persuaded me that we're not allowed to comment on rulings that have been given because the judgment itself is going to be given on the 11th of November. A ruling has been delivered, and there are fundamental problems with it. I started off talking about, you know, the Article 99 reference, which you quoted from, you know, in opening. And there are a number of other points. You know, one of the issues that was put before the Supreme Court on behalf of the Speaker was that even the statement of case which was put before the Supreme Court in respect of the application, the originating process, it was not compliant with Rule 46(2) of the Supreme Court rules. And that rule simply says that there's going to be verification by an affidavit of whatever the plaintiff is bringing before the court. There was no such affidavit. And again, this was not in dispute because the plaintiff, in seeking to oppose Mr. Sori's argument, did not dispute that there was no affidavit. We didn't hear any response to that failure to provide an important element in the statement of case, an important element in the making process. Now, the reason why that's important is because, again, the rules of the court, the rules of the Supreme Court have a very clear in Rule 29, where the rules of court.
Your line.
Bar further proceedings unless the non-compliance is made by the court. Nothing in the ruling indicates that. Nothing in the ruling indicated the court had waived.
And you're breaking a bit. I'm sorry, Mr. Chikata, you're breaking a bit. But I just want to. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Chikata, you're breaking a bit. You're breaking a bit. We can't hear you clearly, but I want to understand, really, in the nutshell, what you're saying. You made a point earlier that you have fundamental problems with this whole ruling. And I just wanted to find out from you, aside from the procedural one, what exactly is that fundamental issue you have? Because I quoted earlier when I was, or Mr. Lowe was on the floor, that the Chief Justice said that procedure cannot override legality. So I just want to understand, really, if that is the point you want to make, disagreeing with the CJ. Okay, so we'll have to reconnect to Chachichi Kata. The line is not helping us today, but I want to come to you, Mr. David, very briefly. We still don't have a Imedu entry yet. Hopefully he joins us before we wrap up with the program, but you have some response.
Yes, Mr. Chikata said as if I was trying to gag a critique of the ruling. I never said so. I've never said so here. I mean, when a ruling of the court is handed, we all have an unfettered right to critique the ruling. All I was saying is that in the attempt to critique the ruling, don't let us get into the substantive matter. And Mr. Chikata knows that that is the position of the law. I mean, as trained lawyers, that is it. It's a right. I mean, we don't have to haggle over it, all right? Now, you see, that's why I'm saying that I was in the courtroom and I listened attentively. In the affidavit in support of Thaddeus Oris's application, all right, he had, as most often than not we all do as lawyers, had taken another step in speaking to the substantive matter. Because if you are going to vacate an order or a ruling of the court, your application should be pointed to that, basically. But if you raise issues of the writ not invoking the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, it is another leg of your case altogether. And that's go to the substantive matter. That's what I'm saying. I'm careful. When I come to studios, I go to the radio station, I'm careful to limit myself to what has happened. Because when you stray, when you don't take time, you will stray into the substantive matter pending. That matter that Thaddeus Ori raised, if indeed the Supreme Court should find favor with the submissions, the case is ended. Because if the jurisdiction was not invoked properly, then there's something before the court. So you see, let's stay a thin line between a critique of the ruling and the substantive matter which is pending in the court. That will be determined on the 11th. So it's not as if I am preventing anyone from critiquing the ruling. I don't even have the right to do that. It doesn't lie with me.
Let's say a thin line. And Mr. Chikata is back on the line, so we can go to him now for his thoughts. I know you didn't conclude on your thought, but before you do so, though, listening to your argument before the line broke, is it fair to say that the Supreme Court of Ghana is perhaps using, as it were, constitutional interpretation as a cover to assume complete jurisdiction or total authority when it comes to this area?
Let me express it in my own words. I am indicating that in that ruling, the Supreme Court failed to apply its own rules of court. And I mentioned Rule 46(2), which requires that when a plaintiff is coming before the Supreme Court with a certain matter in relation to seeking interpretation, seeking enforcement, that plaintiff must have a statement of case, and the facts and particulars that the plaintiff is relying on should be verified by an affidavit upon which the plaintiff is relying. There was no affidavit. The plaintiff admitted that in response to Mr. Sori's application. The Supreme Court's ruling does not tell us why the Supreme Court failed to apply its own rules of court, especially when there's a Rule 79 which says that non-compliance shall be a bar to further proceedings unless that non-compliance has been waived. And there was no indication that there had been a waiver. There are other fundamental issues. You know, in this plaintiff's writ, the article that the plaintiff was seeking an interpretation of was Article 97(1)(g). 97(1)(g). No. If you look at the writ, they did not include age. That's a fact. They did not include age. So why was the issue of Mr. Honorable Esiama even before the Supreme Court at all? Because age was not a matter that had been brought by the plaintiff. Not only that, the plaintiff did not include the NDC member for Amenfi Central in the people in respect of whom he was seeking certain orders of the Supreme Court. Yet the Supreme Court at the end had that member also included in its orders. So the Supreme Court, in that sense, is acting outside the framework of its own rules, outside the framework of the writ that was put before it. And that, I would like to say, is the reason why a former Chief Justice of the land can make the kind of comments that have been made, that, it's predictable. It's almost like when it's not only her, by the way. I mean, you had a former, or a minister for national security also talk about Supreme Court decisions always tending to go one way. In other words, the issue of the partisanship with which adjudication is going on.
So if I get you correctly, what you're saying is that the last week's ruling kind of intensifies the perception that the courts are becoming more political than legal. That's what you're saying?
Well, I mean, absolutely. But as I say, I like to say it in my own words. And my words are to the effect that observers who are not, members of the opposition to the government and observe.
Okay, the line to Mr. Chikata just froze again, but we'll come back to him, wrap up with his thoughts and get the final word of Frank Davis as well as George Lowe. You're still here on Agenda on TV3. When we come back, we will look at one of the main reasons the Chief Justice used to make the decision she eventually, or take the decision she eventually took, which was that those respective constituencies were going to suffer going into this year's general election, because with just a little over a month, there will be no opportunity for a by-election. Don't go away. Stay with us.
Papa Sammy, I beg, if you find something small, give us.
Bro Sammy, you see, nobody say boys no one do nothing and just they rely on handouts. Jobs to no deal.
I understand your hassle. Hope they come. John Mahama, they come do the national apprenticeship program where he go sort you guys.
Brother Sammy, waiting with that.
John Mahama knows say no be everybody where won't work for office.
Like me.
That one day is true.
Under the national apprenticeship program, young men and women where they won't learn craft will be enrolled under the program and attached to a senior craftsman who will train them for free.
I beg you, mechanic day inside. Me like this, I don't want to learn mechanical, but the course no.
Mechanics day inside. Yeah. Organizing, dressmaking, fabric making, catering, hairdressing, tiling, painting. What they even sweet about this whole thing is say, when you plead, the NDC government go make sure say they go give you certificate where you go fit take go look for job anywhere.
That's sweet. Oh, that's be one wonderful.
Another wonderful thing be say, when you plead, the NDC government go set you up with startup capital and equipment to make sure you can start your own business.
Wow! I dey go shopping my town wait 7th December.
Vote for change. Vote for John Mahama and the NDC.
Nana, who are you voting for this year?
Habateria. As for this question, you need not ask. John Mahama and the NDC, of course. Who else? You know there should be a change. Maybe I should have brought my to about
Nana, born before computer.
Yeah,
do you still remember how to vote?
I am so sharp. On December 7th, when I get to my police station, I'll take my voter's ID card to the EC officer. He will check, find my name, and give me a ballot paper. I'll inspect the ballot paper and make sure the EC stamp is at the back with no other markings around it. When I get to the box, I will just inspect the paper again, search for the umbrella. I will just put my thumb in the ink pad and stamp the empty box just by the umbrella, not on the line or Mohammed's face, but in the empty box just by the umbrella. Then I clean my hand, fold my ballot paper vertically and horizontally, and drop it straight into the presidential box.
Nana, well done.
On the parliamentary candidate, I'll just stamp my hand in the empty box just by the umbrella. Now I'm done. Give it back.
Hey, na.
Vote for change. Vote for John Mahama and the NDC.
And you're still here on Agenda. You're welcome back. I was telling you about one of the main reasons the Chief Justice used in dismissing whatever it is that was before her on just last week before we await the 11th November judgment. And the CJ was concerned. She said that she was concerned that those 4 constituencies whose MPs were being asked to vacate their positions would suffer consequences of not being represented with just a little over a month to the country's general election. And so this circumstance, Mr. Chikata, you mentioned that the Supreme Court did not use its own rules, but the Chief Justice mentioned that the circumstance we were dealing with as at the time she was reading her ruling was exceptional, and mentioned the disenfranchisements, as it were, of these 4 constituencies. How do you respond to that?
Well, the disenfranchisement of anybody does not justify a Supreme Court not complying with its own rules when hearing a case, particularly when it does not give a chance to the defendants to appear for their side to be heard. The Supreme Court gave a ruling, as we call it, ex parte, without hearing the Speaker. And the Supreme Court had every opportunity to hear the Speaker. The Supreme Court chose not to hear. And you know, there are further problems with the decision of the Supreme Court. The application that was before the court was made ex parte, even though earlier on they had filed a motion on notice for the injunction order. Now, I mean, Mr. Davis, I'm sure will recall, he, in a similar situation in respect of Honorable Judge Kwesi, tried to get the Supreme Court ex parte to give certain orders without hearing Judge Kwesi. And the first question he was asked as soon as he got up in court is, are you expecting us to make these orders without hearing? You know, I just happened to be in court that day. You know, we were not served. I was not there as a representative or as counsel for Judge Kwesi. But the Supreme Court itself found it appropriate that an order should be made for Honorable Judge Kwesi to be served before they would continue the hearing in respect of that matter. In this particular matter, the Supreme Court proceeded at breakneck speed with an application that was filed after midday on Friday. The Supreme Court doesn't normally sit on Fridays. Somehow the Chief Justice, you know, who is not all powerful, by the way, let's not, you know, when we talk about the Supreme Court having power to interpret and enforce and so on, it doesn't make them all powerful or infallible. The Supreme Court decided that on this occasion, without hearing the Speaker or giving the opportunity to the Speaker to be heard, they would proceed ex parte with certain orders.
So for you, that was double standard?
Well, I mean, there's multiple reasons why that is just not acceptable. But let me make a final point as far as, you know, the failures of the Supreme Court in its ruling are concerned. You know, the Supreme Court was faced with a so-called application to stay execution of the ruling of the Speaker of Parliament. Now, an application for stay of execution, as is fairly elementary within legal procedures, relates to execution of court decisions or court orders. The Speaker does not fall within the judicial hierarchy. And so that application itself was completely strange. I mean, let somebody, and let any judge or lawyer point me to where in any of the constitutional provisions, rules of court, Courts Act, and so on, where the Supreme Court or any other court is given power to stay execution of a ruling of the Speaker of Parliament.
And on this point, I want to come to Mr. Davis, but I want to come to you with a quote from the father of the president in 1968. In that case between Republic versus Liberty Press Limited and others, 1968 exactly, where Mr. Edward Akufo-Addo, then I believe CJ, because eventually he became ceremonial president, said that the judiciary, and I'm quoting, like any other democratic institution, must justify its continued existence. This implies that its actions and conduct must be subject to the same measure of public scrutiny as any other governmental institution. I'm sure you heard Mr. Chikata made a point similar to this point. Do you feel that we're deviating from this in 2024?
We are not deviating from anything, Beatrice. After the ruling, there has been a lot of critique. And that is exactly what we are also being called upon to do here. So nothing has deviated from what Akufo-Addo CJ said. There have been a plethora of discussions on all radio stations, television stations, talking about this ruling. And that is what we are doing. Fundamentally, we are expressing ourselves, the rights that we have as Ghanaians. Taking inspiration from what Mr. Chikata said, I mean, the Chief Justice is not a fount unto herself. She's the head of the judiciary, she's the Chief Justice, yes. But it doesn't mean that when rulings come. But all I say is that there should be moderation in the way we critique and, as it were, lambast the justices of the Supreme Court. It is the language that we use. You can tell someone up front that you are reckless with your hands. But if you tell the person that he's a thief, the person will be offended. But if you say you are reckless with your hands, before the person goes to, as it were, digest what you have said, you will have...
So you're saying we should be diplomatic with that?
Diplomatic with our language, the way we criticize it.
But what would you say to those who say that you have to say it as it is? If they assume...
Well, I mean, we all have ways of speaking. What was the meaning of saying it as it is? If you insult someone, you have insulted the person. And so, let me come to the matters that Mr. Chikata raised. First, let me point out that the CJ, the former Chief Justice, so far, has been misquoted every day. What she said was politicians politicizing judicial decisions has become predictable. That is what she said. She never said that the Supreme Court has become predictable. So people should refrain now from quoting her. This is exactly what she said. And if you want to lay hands on what she said on that day, go to the radio station or whichever TV station it is. She said politicians politicizing judicial decisions has become predictable. Now, moving from there, Mr. Chikata, Jachikwesin and this present matter before the court are clearly distinguishable. Now, Jachikwesin, we went ex parte. Yes, I wouldn't run away from it. And ex parte applications are allowed. I mean, ex parte applications are allowed. That is why they are funded in the rules. We are all lawyers. Ex parte applications are allowed. If I go ex parte, it's up to the judge to grant me my relief for a limited number of days. It's an interim order. It is not interlocutory. Within the period of that interim order, I'm called upon to repeat the application on notice. So there is nothing wrong with it. Now, Jachikwesin was a sitting member of Parliament, even though the High Court at that time had ruled or given judgment to the effect that his election to be a member of Parliament was void because of ABC. Now, the matter had been taken up in the Court of Appeal, and we're still dealing with the matter. What the Supreme Court asked me was that, Mr. Davis, you don't want to give him the opportunity to be heard. He's a sitting member of parliament. Now, distinguish that from what was happening in this case. These people have been asked to vacate their seats. That was the exceptional circumstance. They had been made to vacate their seats, so time was of the essence. Time. So I mean, it doesn't change anything as to whether they were given. At the end of the day, they got the opportunity to also put their case across. So it was the exceptional circumstance that the Supreme Court used.
And I want to come to you, Mr. Judge Lowe. After that, I'll get the final word from all of you before we wrap up.
Well, I take a different view. Sincerely, in fact, my major problem with the ruling is what is being described as exceptional circumstances. What is the
1 month to the general election?
Let me tell you what exceptional circumstances will be. You remember that in the year 2008, in fact, January 2009, the NPP, Per Atachia, went to court to injunct results so that President Mills is not declared president. You remember that?
The point is?
He went ex parte. Even the High Court judge said, how can you come with this? Put him on notice. And that is what ended the case. So I am saying that in this case, why? Judge Kwesi was supposed to have lost his seat and who was supposed to wait for what's it called? A rerun of that election. These people who have even less than 20 days to. What is the exceptional circumstance? Parliament was going to sit up to about just 15. An order has been made. In any case, the Speaker's order, if it must be challenged, should be challenged under 99(1).
Should be challenged under.
So as for anybody who is floating himself around, people can interpret it how they like. I am of the view that, sincerely speaking, they were busybodies. The 4 people had a right to go, even if their human rights were being had. We have a human rights division of the High Court. So all these things is in that here and there. We are saying that the Supreme Court, per that ruling, have become consistently inconsistent. And it's giving people, means what? It's giving people the impression
you and who?
that they are playing politics rather than
George.
No, that law. And you see, even when your national security minister,
Mr. Davis, please, I'll come
when
to you
your national security minister comes to tell you that you have become too consistent in a certain pattern, so please watch it.
I think what Kamdapa said was that when it is seen, he didn't say that. He didn't make an emphatic point.
The point I'm making is that if Kamdapa had a cause to worry, then there's a cause to worry. He is the national security minister of this country. Look, to make it even more the best. You see, they say when the frog comes out of water to tell you that the crocodile is crying, you must believe it. Justice Atuguwa, immediate past justice of the Supreme Court. And he has been acting CJ on a couple of occasions. He is a very highly respected judge of the Supreme Court. When he comes out to say that he believes the Supreme Court shouldn't assume jurisdiction over this.
Let me get the final word of Mr.
It clearly shows that there was something amiss.
There's something amiss. That is how we end Agenda today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Beatrice Edu. My panel members have been Frank Davids, who is the chairman of the Constitutional Legal Committee of the governing New Patriotic Party, and also I've had George Lowe, who is a lawyer, leading member of the opposition NDC, as well as a former member of parliament for North Dang in the Volta region, and Chachu Chikata, a renowned lawyer and lead lawyer for the opposition NDC during the 2012-2013 election petition. Well, we couldn't get through to Ahmed Entry, but hopefully next time he can join us. My name is Beatrice Edu. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do enjoy the rest of our programs. Have a good evening. Join us again next week.
Ghana Tonight is brought to you by
Flamingo Paint. Superior durability, superior hiding, superior coverage, simply superior.